And I think this was a pretty long, tedious video to get through if you're not concerned about the properties of silicone. If you're looking at the design for mold making, this isn't really the one. But once you get to the level of advanced mold making, you're going to want to manipulate the materials that you have so you don't have to buy so many other ones. All right, we're back at it, you guys. This is back with Brick in the Yard. I like this guy's videos. He seems pretty chill, and he's got a good voice. He's a good moderator. He could probably do a baseball game with no problem. Softening silicone for medical simulators and skins. Oh, I got some stories about this. Let's see what his stories are.
Well, it's time for another video, and in this tutorial, we're going to explain the use of a silicone.
He can grow a lot of
SC5000
genetically blessed
002. And this is a silicone thinner or silicone fluid that can be added to silicone formulas to lower the viscosity and lower the durometer. Now what we're going to do is we're going to be
so if you haven't made silicone molds, none of what he just said really matters. Here's why it does matter, and here's how I used to work in my shop. You can have 15 different types of silicones in your shop. One that's a little watery, one that's soft, one that's for this, one that's for that, one that's for this. What I ultimately did is I had most of my years, and it's different now, most of my years I used one silicone and I simply manipulated that silicone. If it wasn't soft enough, I added the thinner, and then I had soft silicone. If it wasn't thick enough, I would either add the Cabosil, or what my preference was, because I didn't like Cabosil, for health reasons, I did it when I had to, is I would take that silicone and I would simply accelerate it. And I could use a special chemical accelerator to accelerate the silicone and make it into a peanut butter, and then whoosh, 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 work fast, but I didn't have to add any fillers, and the accelerator didn't weaken the structure of the silicone as did the thixotropic agents. So these additives can matter because you need less materials in your shop. Let's see.
Adding this additive to 5110F platinum silicone. Now, this is part of the 5100 series.
Okay, I know this gentleman said he closed his shop. Otherwise, I would encourage people to buy from him in his area. You know, you can buy from a regional person. It's very helpful. So look at these names here. TC, let's diagnose this. TC probably means tin cured. S1, I don't know, silicone. F, see, I don't know those naming conventions. But if you begin to look at what a name could mean, it's not just blibbity blobbity blah NASA. It starts to mean something to you. And then you know what to buy. Otherwise, it's intimidating to buy materials from people.
Platinum silicones I've highlighted in a couple of other videos. And all of these silicones in this series cure translucent, which makes them ideal for both molding applications and casting applications. And these come in a variety.
So I disagree. I think that translucent silicone materials are ideal for two things that I'm aware of. One is for pigmentation, so for special effects. It's a hot topic, that's really good. And the other is for making molds that you actually need to be able to see through in order to cut. There's a technique where you pour transparent silicone over something, and then you can see where it is, and you cut it off with a razor, and you can follow the lines because you got a visual target. But I do not like mixing translucent materials. I add pigment anyways, otherwise I don't know if I have a good mix.
Variety of durometers from really, fairly firm to fairly soft. Now the whole point of the SC5002 additive and being able to soften formulas like this is there might be a gap sometimes between.
Man, he's a one-take guy.
Like this, for instance, is around 25 short A.
He knows his shit.
This one is around a 5 short A. So there's an obvious gap there in that A scale between these two silicones. So what we can do if we need something in between these.
This is kind of techy. Most people don't really need to control it this much, but I'm going to let it play through because there may be some silicone people out there that are worried about the durometer scale, the short A scale.
If we're making a mold that requires a specific softness or a part that requires a specific softness, we can add the SC5002 to bring this down closer to this 5. But
basically, you're diluting the silicone. That's a more layman's term. You're cutting it, and it's going to make it softer. I think that's important when you're trying to match body textures. For surgical models, for sewing tests, suture tests.
In this video, we're actually going to be dropping the 5 down even lower to a Shore 0020. So that's really important, again, so that you can take these existing formulas and adjust them to what you need them to be on that A scale or even the 00 scale. Now to begin, we're going to spray our mold with mold release. This is a TC800 resin mold, and more about that in a future video. But we're going to take that resin mold and spray it with zip
So
mold
TC
release.
doesn't mean tin cured, because TC was in urethane, so I don't know his naming convention. I don't think you need to spray this mold. Silicone, it doesn't hurt, right? But certainly don't spray it without ventilation.
Real important here, we want to make sure we spray that,
I wouldn't brush it.
tail, and then allow it
I wonder
to
why.
dry. And that's an important step.
He might know something I don't.
Gassing into the silicone after you cast it. Now, the silicone
Egyptian
ratio translucent silicones. And I really like this line because you can use these for both mold
No, it was a lot of traveling.
for literally every point on that scale. So it's important to know how to modify those to get what you want.
We're talking 30 years of mold making here, and I never got fussy with that stuff. I just didn't have the clientele that I had to meet that needed that durometer. We had two durometers. We had soft and firm. And soft was Shore 20 and firm was Shore maybe 45. That's in the culinary world for us.
Now this first cast we're going to do using 50 grams of part A and 50 grams of part
Scale the bag.
50
You hear me say that?
F. And I really like the fast formula. Fast formula, again, is about a 7 to 8 minute working time at room temperature and about a 1 hour demold. And I'm
That's
in
fast.
Texas where it's typically fairly warm, so sometimes I can even demold in under an hour, like around 45 minutes. So nice for fast turnaround, especially product development applications where you need to produce a part quickly, or just production casting. Now I'm adding a little bit of our flesh tone to that and mixing that in, and again, this is just the TC 5110F mixed 1-to-1, and this can also be...
I think this is a big mistake that distributors and material providers make. They give their products names that you can't remember. It's too confusing. It doesn't let people that are new come into it easily.
Being mixed 1-to-1 by volume. You can mix it 1-to-1 by weight or volume, but you want to be as accurate as possible in these small batch sizes.
That's really important, actually. So if you're working on your ratio and you're mixing up 1,000 grams and you got a 10-to-1 and you got 100 grams of catalyst, if you're off by a few grams, so what? But if you got 10 grams and 1 gram of catalyst, and you're off, you've thrown your mix by 10%. So small batches have to be precisely measured. Big batches, less so.
We've got that mixed up. We're ready to pour that into our mold.
Boom.
And I'm not even going to degas these batches. This is a fairly simple part. And because this does have that really low viscosity, a lot of simple parts like this don't have to be vacuum degassed.
He's good. He does each thing.
Video on the end screen, be sure to check
Explains
out
it clearly
on vacuum degassing so you can see why that's important for other applications. Now we're going to set this aside and let that cure.
The only thing that I would do differently is when he poured, I just cut with that stick, and the reason is when you set your cup back down, the silicone dribbles down the edge of the cup, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you grab that cup again, now it's on your hands, and it can stick to your hands. I've actually spilled cups of resin that way, and that's when I got resin in my eye that one time, is the cup, I thought I set it down, and it actually stuck to my hand, and then I got splashed. It was really not great. Plus then also those drips just get on the table. So a clean cut after you pour really makes a big difference. Don't do what I did.
Cure, and now ready to mix up our batch of 5110F with the SC5002 thinner. Now this batch,
you can use that lid to cut off your pour
part A plus 50
and
grams of
twist
part
it.
B plus 50 grams of SC5002. Now, this isn't the top.
Whenever you buy your raw materials, whenever we would get something in, we would have, I forget what we called it, I haven't been in that shop in a while, but we put a date on the jar or the bottle or whatever the minute we opened it. So we had a sense of how old something was, because all these packages look alike and people start swapping A's and B's around. And it's not like each age needs to go together, but you can have part B for a jug that came in January and part A in January, and then if someone uses a February jug, now your ratios are off and you start buying extra part A or part B because somebody left one open and it's spoiled. So stay with the kit that you buy based on the dates. And if you're a one-person shop, you don't need to do that. But if you got more than one person, you got to leave a little bit of history so people don't start mixing up batches and throwing your ratios off.
Top end of this, I haven't seen exactly where this starts to just fail as far as curing with too much silicone thinner in it.
I've seen where it fails.
But, this will give you a good idea of how much you can load in the material and still get.
He puts a lot in there. I'll talk about silicone thinner probably later. This is just a good introduction. What happens if you put 15, 20% of silicone thinner, it doesn't fail the silicone cure. What happens is your silicone stays greasy and it kind of oils off. And when you set it, if you set it onto a piece of cardboard, it absorbs the oil from there. So, of course, some molds don't matter, but in the culinary industry, you can't mess with the formula because you got to stay within food grade tolerances. But I used to thin stuff all the time for casting. It just got greasy. It was weird.
Get a nice soft silicone. So now I'm adding the SC5002. And remember, you don't have to add up to this percentage.
So if you have containers that are going to have small dispensing, he's tipping. For not much more, you can buy caps that will fit this that actually let you get a little more directional, kind of like a ketchup dispenser. You know, it has the old ones have the old cone, and then you can drop things out and have a more controlled pour. For small batches, that's really important. If that's what your shop does, you should not pour like this. It's too uncontrolled. Just buy some caps.
Typically, when I just want to adjust the softness a little bit, I might use like 10 or 20%.
You see how he's hesitating?
Extreme
because he doesn't want to.
I'm going to show at the end of the video why this is necessary sometimes. So now we're going to add
a better tip
pigment to this. And typically, you know, just using a little dab of silicone pigment, I don't even measure it, but you don't want to typically exceed about 2% of the total
that's a lot
in silicone pigment. And that's a lot. You have to add a lot to hit that 2% mark. Now we're going to
pigment's expensive.
You can see
at that level.
That's a lot lower viscosity than that original batch. So when we thinned it down like that, you notice that's a nice, really thin, super low viscosity material. Now, a couple of side effects.
Just a simple mixing thing. You guys, I'm trying to like rack my brain for memories of things that are helpful. And I'm not trying to force feed everything into what he's doing. I'm trying to come up with things that inspire a different type of workflow for you rather than a critique of this. And they're just things that may come up in your shop or not. If your hand doesn't hold a mixing container nicely like this, you have to use things with handles because once that container gets out of your control, you're holding it from the top or whatnot. So things with handles are very useful. And like I said, it doesn't matter, but if someone doesn't mention it, you'll be like, oh, and you're shopping, you may as well buy something with a handle, especially if you power mix.
You soften a silicone this much,
you need a handle to.
You're going to get a slightly lower tear strength, and if you add a whole lot, it might even leach some oil. But it's also going to slow down the cure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour this in the bowl,
it's like syrup.
And then I'm going to let it set for about 2 hours. So we're going to come back to that, and we're first going to demold that first ear. Now the first ear, again, this is about an hour later. Always a good idea to keep that mixing cup on hand, check your batch, check your mixing, make sure everything's cured okay, and then demold your part. And this is pretty easy to demold without.
He went right by the sexy part so fast. Everybody usually likes to see things coming out of the molds, you know?
Yes, boss, I'm on the mic. I'll try to give you what you like. I can.
Without any special effort, but just remember, instead of prying out with a screwdriver or something like that, always good to use a blunt wooden tool when you're prying out a resin mold so you don't accidentally mar the inside of your mold, especially if you have a mold with skin texture or anything like that in it. Now ready to demold that softened piece. And we want to be
It looks pretty goopy
because this is really soft.
Yeah, they'll tear.
So it still has really good elasticity and good elongation, but we want to take care that we don't just yank that out of the mold because this is a very soft part. And again,
it'll tear.
Using
It's not as strong as he says. It's really fresh.
Stick to help demold.
Silicone continues to cure for the coming days, but when you take it out like this, kind of green, so to speak, it's a delicate little piece of jello.
Just make sure you don't use a metal tool that could scrape the inside of the mold.
I used to use metal tools all the time. You just take a butter knife, and they were great. I didn't like wood tools because they were too fat, the thickness of wood. You just use a knife from the thrift store, butter knife, and you just put that in, and you just peel it out. I never scratched anything.
And there we have our finished softened ear, and now ready to test that to see. You can see visibly that's a lot softer. About as soft as we can probably get that and still have it be stable in product. And we're going to get out my A gauge. So this is a Shore A gauge for measuring on that A scale.
Okay.
And you'll see that
he's just geeking out now.
The one that doesn't have thinner in it, it measures just right around
What are we
5.
doing?
This is probably still curing a little bit, so it's still a little bit on the soft side.
All right, so he made it softer. That's what we're talking
An
about.
idea of how this would work in a practical
What do we got?
using the thixotropic additive, the 5001 thixotropic additive.
What are we doing?
And we just brush in is to give it that very realistic. Check those out. And as far as my new video schedule goes, in the section of this mold, so around a 50 on the double.
We'll stop right here.
And then when we measure our really soft ear, that's going to be just over a 20.
His video continues into maybe the lead into another video, and I think this was a pretty long, tedious video to get through if you're not concerned, because not concerned about the properties of silicone. If you're looking at the design for mold making, this isn't really the one, but once you get to the level of advanced mold making, you're going to want to manipulate the materials that you have so you don't have to buy so many other ones. And it's not like, hey, don't buy the material that you need. It's just sometimes you don't have it and you have a tight deadline. You're like, oh my gosh, I got to work with what's here. It's like a chef, right? You know, what do I got in the kitchen? I got guests coming. I don't have time to go shopping. So it's kind of like getting caught short. This is a great manipulation. There's other additives such as the accelerators. But so we're going to chalk this up as a geeking out silicone manipulation thing. And I think for the advanced mold makers out there, we should all give this guy a high five for taking the time to make this video for something that's a little bit boring. So well done, Brickyard. I think you should look at his channel. Thanks for watching.
Hello, sweet pie.